a good break? Awesome. All right, our next speaker is Jennifer A. Parker. Right? Okay. She's everybody listen to this. This is important. I'm a teacher. I can't. I didn't go. Right? She is a heart transplant survivor. I told you you wanted to hear that. Right? She's a former healthcare leader. Her work now centers around empowering others to speak up for themselves and their loved ones. A more than 20-year stage 4 breast cancer survivor. She's meant to be here, people! Something powerful! Wow! Oh my goodness. Her journey has included chemotherapy, induced congestive heart failure, and life-saving heart transplants in 2023. These experiences have shaped her mission to campaign compassionately for patient-centered care. Before becoming a patient advocate, she spent over 2 decades as a laboratory operations manager, managing multiple departments, teams, and systems in wide initiatives. Let's give it up for her.
Thank you. I grew up in Chicago, moved to Tennessee when I was 16, graduated from Fernwood Elementary. Anybody? Went to Corliss High School for about a year and a half, but I'm so glad to be here. I'd like to tell you, start with telling you about my journey. The thing that I learned during my journey was that in healthcare, one of the most important truths is your voice matters. Your voice is essential. It's not extra, it's essential. I didn't learn this in a textbook or in a seminar. I learned this in hospital beds, in waiting areas, in long car rides to appointments that I never knew that I would need. I may not use the speaker because I just want to focus on what I'm saying. But I'm sorry, the pointer. But I didn't learn it there. I learned it, like I said, in hospital rides and everything. So my talk is about it is about illness, but more importantly, it's about advocating for yourself and for your loved ones. A study with the AHQR reviewed 114 studies with 34,000 patients, and they confirmed that patient-centered care, where the patient is involved in their health care, is tremendously gives better outcomes for the patients. When you're involved in your care, when you have a say in what is being done to you, makes a difference. So my talk is about advocacy. So what does advocacy really mean? Advocacy can be defined as a public support of a plan, an idea, or a way of doing something. It doesn't mean, advocacy doesn't mean that you're being confrontational. When you talk to advocate for yourself with kindness and clarity, it can make a tremendous difference. Advocacy means that you want to understand the process, you expect answers, you can say no to something that's not working, and most importantly, you need to remember that your life is worth fighting for. So my story starts in 2005 when my oldest daughter was getting ready to go to college. For some reason, we were the week before we were going to go to orientation, I decided I hadn't had my yearly physical. I was 3 months behind. She was going to college, all the stuff with graduation. My youngest daughter was doing competitive cheerleading, which was a lot, and so there was a lot going on. So like we've said in other talks, we don't take care of ourselves. So I decided to go ahead and make an appointment, and the first appointment that I could get with the doctor that I normally go to was in September. This was July. And something told me, don't wait, waited long enough, don't wait. So I called my family doctor, and he was able to get me in the following Monday, which was perfect because Tuesday we were going to registration orientation. And so he put me in for Monday. When he did my breast exam, he found a lump. He immediately wanted me to go get a diagnostic mammogram. And advocating for myself, I said, let's do it on Thursday. We're going to orientation tomorrow, and I do not want to miss that. 2 days, I've already missed 3 months, 2 days is not going to go. So he did. On Thursday, I had the mammogram, and they did find a mass. They immediately wanted me to schedule an appointment with the surgeon. The nurse was able to get me in with the only surgeon that I knew who had done my husband's surgery on his shoulder years before. So I chose him. We went to him, and when we got there, I asked him if we could do a frozen section of the mass. We had already discussed if it was malignant, I was gonna have a mastectomy. And so by doing the frozen section, it meant that the pathologist would be there. When they took the mass out, they would look at it. If it's malignant, they'd tell the surgeon, he'd do the mastectomy. So that's what happened, that's what they did, and this was done on a Monday, so everything happened, it was like Monday, Thursday, Friday, Monday. So Monday, went to surgery, and when I woke up, I asked my husband, was it cancer? He said yes. So it was, no known family history, just the new norm. So I went through chemotherapy and through very aggressive radiation, and we later found out that it was stage 4 breast cancer. I took the chemotherapy. It gave me 16 years of life, extra years of life, where I saw many grandchildren, graduations, weddings, and all of this stuff. In 2021, I decided that I was going to retire early. So 3 months later, I was diagnosed with chemotherapy-induced congestive heart failure. I stayed on the same regimen for over a year. First, I wore a life vest for 6 months. Right after the life vest, they placed a defibrillator in. And they never changed my medication, no changes to my numbers. I never gotten that. So during a second hospitalization within 45 days, they had tried a new medicine that they put me on. It was causing severe side effects, several side effects. And when we were when I was in the hospital that second time, my husband told the on-call provider, who wasn't even my normal cardiologist, or someone who was on call, told him that I couldn't continue taking the medication because it was causing too many side effects. And the provider was upset about it. He mumbled something, but anyway, my husband simply, in the same tone of voice, said she can't continue taking this medication. It's causing too many side effects. So in that moment, he was advocating for me, and he did not back down. He didn't get ugly. He said the same. He repeated what he said in the same tone of voice. And once my youngest daughter found out about that incident, she immediately called my nurse practitioner cousin, who lives in Alabama, 4 hours away from us. And she asked her can you please find my mom another cardiologist? And she did. I was discharged from the hospital that Tuesday, and by Friday I was in another provider's office who listened to me. They made just a few changes. I felt physically, emotionally, and spiritually better by making that change. But my numbers didn't change. My numbers stayed the same, and a little bit closer, okay. My numbers stayed the same, and so they decided, well, after 3 months, let's do a pacemaker. They had to do a test to make sure, a scan, to make sure they could implant the pacemaker before they scheduled it, because I had scar tissue from the mastectomy. And so the scan came back, they could do it. I went to the appointment, follow-up appointment. When I got there, they had something else in mind. The electrophysiologist told me, he said, Mrs. Parker, we looked at your case. We don't want to do the pacemaker. We think you need to consult. We've consulted with the team at UAB, the transplant team at UAB, and we would like for you to go and see them, consult with them. And I did not, I had so many more good days than I had bad days. The winter was horrible. You know, I was in the hospital twice. It was bad, but this was, you know, going into May, June. We had our vacation in Alabama on the beach, and I was feeling okay. And so I just asked him, I said, can't we just try the pacemaker first? And to my surprise, in that same tone of voice that my husband, he repeated back exactly what he said, Mrs. Parker, we think you need to consult with the transplant team at UAB. And I believed it, so I agreed. Before I agreed, I asked him this question, because a doctor would always tell me, one of my family practice doctors would always say, if you were Becky, I would do this. Becky was his wife. And that stuck with me. And so when he told me that, since he looked 24 years old, I said, if I was your mother, what would you tell me to do? And he said, with all the little pieces, so the cutest doctor, with the little sympathy on his face, he said, Mrs. Parker, that's a great question. If I were your mom, if you were my mom or my sister, I would tell you to consult with the team at UAB. And so I said, okay, I'll do it. And he said, they'll be calling you with an appointment, and if they say that we can do the pacemaker, then we'll do it. And I'm sure he knew I would not be back. I would not see him again. You know, I reached out to him and told him, thank you for saving my life on my chart. But in that, by them doing that, you know, my daughter advocated for me by saying, hey, you need another doctor. And then these two group of doctors that I went to advocated for me without my knowledge with UAB. And UAB advocated for me before I ever stepped foot on their campus. And so it just goes to show that there are people who care, there are doctors who care, but if we don't have the doctors that we have doctors that don't care, we need to find someone else. We don't have to do it aggressively. We don't have to say, I'm gone. What I did, I went to the next doctor, I canceled my appointments, and that was it. And so the next part of the story is getting to UAB. My husband was scheduled for surgery on Friday. UAB called me Wednesday, hey, we've got a cancellation on Thursday, can you come? Yes, I can come. And so I drove an hour to my sister's house to pick her up. That's how good I felt, y'all, for real. Yeah. Drove out to her house, picked her up so she could drive the next 3 hours, because Birmingham is 4 hours away from us. And so we did that. The person who made the appointment was wonderful. She was just wonderful. So going into UAB, my sister let me out at the back door. There was nurses who knew that I looked lost, and they took me to the department I needed to go to. So once I got there, I felt even better than I did after I talked to the person who made the appointment. I had to go to several departments to EKG, chest x-ray. They did a echocardiogram, just a bunch of tests that I had to do before I saw the doctor. So I did all those tests. I had time for lunch. My appointment was at 1 o'clock. They got us back there before 1 o'clock, which was another great thing. And the doctor walks in the room. My cousin who works at the VA, is close to UAB, she was there to be able to come to my appointment since it was at 1. She took her lunch and came. So she and my sister and I were in there. The doctor walks in and he introduces himself. I introduce him to my sister and my cousin, and he looks at them, and he turns his gaze on me and says, "Mrs. Parker, we looked at your results from what Alabama Cardiovascular has sent us. We've looked at everything you've done today, and we need to admit you to the hospital today to fix what's going on now. And while you're here, we need to evaluate you for a heart transplant, and you may not get to go home until you get one." That was difficult, and I'm sure he could see it on my face, because my first thought that went through my mind was, so you're telling me, I didn't say it, but it's like he read, you're telling me that someone has to die in order for me to live. And that in itself was a lot. But he looked at me and he said, "If you need to go home, I can send you home with medicine for 3 days, and you can come back." And I knew better. I said no immediately. I said, because I was too afraid to do something to make things worse, and then be in the hospital, have to go to the hospital that I was leaving. And so I stayed. And I said, there's nothing that I need at home that can wait. I stayed. And fortunately, we had come Wednesday night and spent the night with my cousin. And so I did have some clothes, a couple things of backup clothes. So, but that was very difficult. I got there on, I actually got my heart 29 days after I stepped on the campus at UAB, which was remarkable. It took about 2 weeks for them to do all the tests that they have to do to evaluate me, and they got all those done, and then I got on the list. I was 4 on the list, and within a few days, I got real bad, and they bumped me up to a 2. My heart came from Houston. I reached out to the family, but I've not heard back, but I'm just so thankful and grateful for them every day that I live. And I'm not sure about my time. Am I doing okay on time? There's just some things that I want to tell you real quick that I've done to honor God, to honor my donor. 4 months after my surgery, with my doctor's permission, I was able to run a 5K. And
Wow.
When I run a 5K, because I've done the Senior Olympics and stuff like that, I'm a sprinter, so I run, walk. During that 5K, there was another run walker, and I had my Donate Life Alabama shirt on, and it was in Alabama, and because we were there for my daughter's at Thanksgiving. It was like that Saturday after Thanksgiving, and we were walking together at one point, and she asked me about my shirt, and so I told her part of my story, and I told her I had a heart transplant, and she said, "Oh my goodness," she said, "I had heart problems too. I had some heart surgery. So has my brother. So has my dad." And she said, "I can't wait to get home and tell them about you. You're out here 4 months from a transplant, and they don't want to do anything." And so that's one of the reasons that, I decided I want to tell my story. I want to tell people not just to advocate for yourself, just to stand up for yourself. Because when you stand up, you show courage not just to yourself and your family, but to other people who may be watching. So just stand up for yourself. Your voice matters.